Back in Brisbane, visitors may be hard-pressed to see obvious signs of damage. But if you scratch the surface, particularly in some of the worst affected suburbs, the signs of the disaster are there. In particular, locals are worn down by battles with insurance companies, as Peter McCutcheon reports from the Riverside suburbs in Brisbane's west.
Brisbane's low-lying suburbs are a hive of activity. The rebuilding is well underway.
Now, put this back on? Okay.
Anthony and Elizabeth Marks haven't moved back home. In fact, once this work is finished, they plan to rent out their property rather than move back to a flood-prone area.
Still just tremendously stressful. Even though you look at it and you think, oh, you know, it's coming back, it looks good. We're not really doing it ourselves, we have other people doing it. Yeah. But still the stress is just in our life, not just this house, but, you know, having an apartment, trying to find another house.
But it's also that, you know, you come back here and every day you're reminded, oh yeah, we flooded.
When the waters peaked here in early January, the Marks family were on holiday in a remote part of Tasmania, as Anthony Marks explained to a 7:30 flood community forum.
When we got into Strawn, we just went to the high street, had a coffee, I picked up the paper, and I just was blown away about what was happening in Brisbane. Went out to a payphone, called our neighbours. They said the water was already devouring our first floor. Oh, hey, this is look.
Since that terrible day, the Marks family has been fighting its insurance company, which argues it isn't liable for the type of flooding to hit these suburbs.
I have gone ahead, I've got some legal advice on our policy, and we have filed an appeal with the Financial Ombudsman Service.
This anger over insurance is literally on display. Bryn Summer lost his insurance battle, but rather than fighting it in court, he's invested money in raising his house above this year's flood level. If a similar flood hit you, would you be safe?
I'd be above the flood, yes.
Everything, or just your top story?
Just the top story, but at least that gives me a good option next time round.
On the other side of the track, in this part of the outer western suburb of Goodna, residents aren't raising their properties. They can barely afford to make their homes livable. Plasterer Jason McQuilty is helping out people without insurance with a discounted service.
A lot of these people weren't really well off in the first place, so they're struggling to get back. There's some churches in the area too, I noticed, that have been supplying with stuff and wardrobes and sheets and all that sort of thing, so that's helped the people out and given them a bit of hope. The floodwaters receded months ago, yet the feelings here are still very raw.
Most of us are sort of back, but we're not in houses and stuff. I mean, people over there, they're living under their house. People over here have just got their walls put up just recently. The people there, they're in their house. And up there, they've just brought all their furniture back and all their belongings back, but I mean, they're not in the house at all.
Is there a two-speed recovery? Those that didn't have many resources to begin with are finding it very tough now.
Look, I think everyone whose house was inundated by water found it tough. I don't know that there's a two-speed recovery, but one of the things that people must remember is that at the end of the day, it's the homeowner's responsibility to fix the home. Now, clearly, most people don't have the financial capacity to do that on their own.
Major General Mick Slater was appointed by the Bligh government to oversee the flood and cyclone rebuilding effort. It's an enormous task involving not only homes but also road and rail reconstruction, essential to the state's economy.
Out of the state-controlled major roads, there was just over 9,100 kilometres damage. 92% of that has already been recovered.
So as the rebuilding continues, today's interim report sheds some light on what can be done better next time disaster strikes. It does little to relieve the stress on families still recovering from the floods, but is welcome nonetheless.
I think what's important to me is that any changes that can be done ahead of the wet season are implemented now. That to me is vital. I was obviously very curious for my own purposes whether or not it would benefit people that are considering legal action. But
it does.
But from what I can tell so far, I don't think it does. And even if it did, I'm not going to get the last 6 months back and huge hours of heartache and emotional upheaval back.